Hello, you guys, and welcome to the Inner Beauty Code. Today's guest is a professional surfer. Her name is Anastasia Ashley. She started surfing at age 5 and has been surfing ever since and traveled all around the world doing competitions and surfing her whole life. Did a lot of other exciting things that I'm going to let her fill you in on. Anastasia, hello and welcome.
Hi, thanks for welcoming me.
Yeah, you are so welcome.
Yeah, no, super stoked to chat with you. I know we've been friends for a while, so this is pretty fun. It's just like having a conversation between friends. So pretty cool that we
I
get to actually record.
I know, and honestly, we started this with a time limit. So for us, on a phone call can be hours, like 3, 4 hours long. So we'll try to keep it short this time. But I want to kind of take everyone through your history a little bit and how you got into surfing, a little bit about your career, and all the exciting things that followed that. So we'll, go step by step. Tell us how you started surfing.
Yeah, so for me, I grew up in Hawaii on the North Shore, and surfing was just everywhere. It was not a trendy place when I lived there. Surfing was like not really the coolest sport. I always thought it was cool, but I was just always really drawn to it. And I thought it was kind of like an extreme, kind of like counterculture vibe. And so I was like, I want to be a surfer. And I didn't really know how or why. And I actually started surfing, finding like a board on the beach that was just like in a trash can. And a lot of the locals and older pro surfers actually at the time were like pretty nice and like welcoming in the community, and they were like, oh, you want to learn how to surf, like here's some tips. So that's how I started, which is pretty interesting when I think about it, because I'm like, wow, like these people changed my life that were like strangers, basically, and gave me some skills to kind of really start surfing and learn. And then I fell in love with it. I competed for probably over like 20 years. I started competing when I was like 5. I still compete here and there selectively, but not really in the last 5 years, but as seriously, like I was dedicated to it for like over 20 years. So I feel like I've lived multiple lives. And then from that, like, obviously to my career now, I competed, traveled around the world, really grinded it out. A lot of my early career was very hard and like not glamorous at all. If anything, it was really,
Yeah.
and so from that too, like I kind of was doing a lot of things that my job now entails, like doing content, doing videos, doing promotions, doing sponsors. And so like when social media kind of happened, I was always like pretty nerdy and techie. Like I had a blog back in like, early 2000s. I was in like AOL chat rooms. I was on Twitter really early, and I always loved the internet because it was always like I could talk to people that I didn't know, like straight up. I was like, oh, this is like really weird and cool at the same time. And like I was pretty nerdy, even though I was like an athlete. I was like, oh, this is like, so cool. Like I probably would have gone into computers or something if I didn't, or computer science if I didn't do what I do now. And yeah, and so from that, I started doing social media pretty early and sharing just like my career as a surfer, which was like a lot of travel, a lot of nice beaches, a lot of cool places that like a lot of people don't really go to at the time. And so it just was really organic. And like obviously when I started doing social media, there wasn't really like money in it, there wasn't an influencer career path, there wasn't anything. So for me it was just like, oh, like here I am competing, showing my career basically online. And then it started to kind of take off, and I realized, I'm like, oh, a lot of people started recognizing me and not even realizing I surf. They just thought I was like a girl on the beach. They're like, oh, I know you from your travels and stuff. And I was like, wait, you don't know that I surf? And they're like, no, we know you from Instagram. So when that happened, I kind of realized like, okay, this is something this is going to be a big thing. Yeah. And then around that same time, I kind of had stepped back a little bit from competing and doing more just like brand work and stuff with my sponsors. And it kind of just organically kind of turned into doing, which is now like more or less like a lot of brand creator, content creation, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it's kind of crazy because I've done that for like 20 years, but I used to do it for like surf magazines and like surf videos and stuff like that, which was like way harder in a way because I always competed against the guys. There wasn't a lot of girl media. So from that, it kind of just organically turned into like this whole other, what I would call second career.
Career.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
I know, and I loved watching it, and I like met you already far into it, but you've said so much there that I wanted to, go back, rewind a little bit and touch on. So just the start of how you started surfing, I find it still so cool how people come into your life, right? And like you said, change your life. And it's so unexpected. And I just think about that and about your history and how, like, who knows, maybe if no one on the beach was ever, any of those people, those guys on the beach were nice to you, like, who knows how it could have shaped your life. But the fact that it literally became your life from that point on is just wild, that the stars aligned and put you in Hawaii on a beach with a
Yeah.
group of people that were willing to help you, that now led to everything that you've done. So I find that to be so cool, just how you got your start to begin with.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think about because again, where I grew up in Hawaii was not a luxurious place at the time. Now it is. It's become a really cool vacation spot, but it was like very common practice that like there was no professional careers. There was no one went to college. It was like a lot of people were dealing drugs and doing drugs, and like it
Yeah.
was a lot of crime, and like that was very normal, like the environment that I grew up in. And so, yeah, like I think for me, being in sports and finding a sport super early, like kept me out of a lot of trouble too. And it kept me
Hmm.
really focused and like not even like, I didn't even have time to like want to be a
Mess
bad
up.
kid. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is kind of crazy when I think about like, I guess it was like a chance encounter. I don't know if it's like also a bit of like, skill with luck because again, like these people saw that I had something that they wanted to
Hmm.
help me with. But I think it's pretty cool, and I think at least for me, like a lot of what I do now or like what I enjoy to do is actually like kind of pay it forward and help people when I can. And so like I love giving people like free advice or like help them out or like tell them, again, my advice sometimes could be good, sometimes could be bad, but whenever people kind of come to me, because I think that is something that you can change someone's life that might not mean much to you. Even the people who gave me some tips and pointers, like probably they went on in their lives and whatever. But for me, it was like a really big deal. So yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then being, like you said, a kid growing up in that area too, I know you mentioned just how surfing, obviously changed your life and shaped like your life path, because then I know you had mentioned to me before about how you started winning competitions and being able to like earn money to then go travel. And I mean, I know it wasn't easy, and like back then it was, you had to spend the money that you earned to be able to go to the next competition kind of thing, right? And then, yeah, be able to travel. So I don't know if you want to get into that. And
Yeah. So when I started competing, it was very much so, you're going to use the prize money from this event to get to the next event. And something that I learned from that also was to be very nifty with my money when it came to traveling and really learn how to make a community and make friends. And this was again to like in the early 2000s when there was no real like mobile phones, there was no kayaks,
social
no
media.
no No, you were printing out MapQuest kind of vibe. And,
Mm-hmm.
so like the traveling aspect then was just really, really, really hard in general. And for me, like, again, a lot of the surf breaks were in these like really remote places. So I would often even times like get to this place and like be like, I wasn't old enough to rent a car. So I had to like figure out like who was going to the event, who like maybe was older, who had a car, or like asking like within the surfer network of like, okay, do you have any like friends or family in this town? Like anyone I can stay with? And it would be, I learned to get pretty creative. I would sleep oftentimes like in my board bag. Like, if someone had like a floor, I was like fine with that because again, it would save me money that I could like just put back into my career. So it's funny because now I do, and I work in a lot of luxury travel and I do a lot of really amazing trips. And people are like, wow, you've been traveling your whole life. And I'm like doing these awesome things. I'm like, well, I'm like,
Well,
before
actually,
before social media, yeah, I was sleeping on the ground oftentimes in like shacks, and I've slept on the beach, I've slept camp to go to an event, like you name it, I've probably done it. And so I am very grateful now that like there is a travel industry that supports athletes and influencers and all kinds of stuff to do really nice travel, and that I've been able to, I can comfortably say I've probably stayed in some of the nicest and worst hotels in the world, like straight up. I'm
I
like, I've
believe
been to the
you.
5 star and I've been to like the negative 5 star, like where like I would not wish my enemy to go there.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So, I want to talk about your social media career because even, I don't know, I think I've known you 7 years now, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. And I remember even when I met you, it was just around that time, like social media, the influencer thing that we know it to be now was just like barely scratching the surface of beginning. And I remember all of our interactions and you telling me about what you were doing at the time or what you needed to do for work or being able to negotiate with brands. And I always found you to be like you had amazing work ethic and a very savvy business person to be able to do all of these things. And I guess that comes with a lot of experience. So tell us about how all the media that you did prior to being an influencer, like you've been in Sports Illustrated, Maxim, Shape, Cosmopolitan, Barstool Sports, a ton of different magazines and shows and TV stuff. So let's talk about that pre social media influencer scene and maybe give us like a few highlights that you really loved doing or maybe some things you didn't love doing prior to becoming big on social media.
So from surfing, I would say that like surfing's always been this interesting thing in the media in general, that people, it's not the most followed sport, it's not the biggest sport, but it's one of the coolest sports. And so
Mhm.
from that, I think there's always been a place in like media for it, where it's like, even if you look at like a lot of big companies advertising, it's like always like a girl with a surfboard on the beach. And surfing is just
Yeah.
like so photogenic. And from doing like media and stuff like before social media, like I was on like MTV reality shows, I did like traditional magazines, like I did FHM even like when I was like 18 years old, like crazy
Mhm.
stuff like that, which like at the time were big deals. Like, I mean, I remember like when I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I'm going to be an FHM magazine. And I was like still like barely out of high school. It was like, that those media forms were so big then. Now it's interesting because like a lot of the bigger medias are like it's like, okay, yeah, if you're on their Instagram, that's almost better than the
Cooler.
magazine. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or like more people see it, and it's just kind of like the way the media's kind of transition. But I think from doing all that stuff, it gave me just like on camera experience, because like I didn't grow up being a model or talking on camera or being in front of a camera. Like it wasn't something that really didn't come that naturally to me. Like it actually took time, and it still is taking time. Like I'm still like, oh my gosh, like do I sound weird? You know, am I not like pronouncing words properly? Am I not sounding smart? Like these are all certain things that like you go through when you're like on camera a bunch, I feel like. And for some people it's very natural, and for me it wasn't. So I think doing all the pre stuff before social media, that I was pretty lucky and blessed to have that experience with, and really helped when it kind of was like, okay, to put yourself out there. Cause I remember even too, people like being really, really weirded out like by Instagram when it first came out. Like, oh my God, you're actually posting your face and you
Same,
on there.
yeah.
Yeah. It was like just for food, which I did that too. And I still think Instagram is one of the most amazing food platforms. Still, it's
Mhm.
started as food
And
and
travel
yeah,
too.
and trees
Travel.
and beach and yeah, just like not pictures of you. So I actually, you know, some of my most people even too are like, oh, what are your most popular pictures? One of my most liked pictures of all time is actually just of trees. So I'm really proud of that. But yeah, having that experience and doing all the stuff
Was
before.
helpful.
Yeah, and I think having real life experience of, you know, just working with brands and doing like my career before really did help kind of lead into doing stuff on social media and working with people, just because I understood the workflow and I understood marketing. Because
Mhm.
again, I had sponsors even when I was like 10 years old. So I had to like report to someone and they were like, what are you
Mhm.
doing? Why are we paying you this money? When, you know, when I was a kid, and I used to have to write, you know, pitches basically, or like
So cool.
proposals to
Yeah.
get a sponsorship then. And it's like kind of the same thing I do now. So it's just a little more sophisticated and, you know, but yeah, I think all that made it very easy for me and pretty seamless.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, when I hear this, it's just incredible because, again, like you mentioned, when we were younger in the early 2000s, when you started doing this, like, who knew that Instagram was going to be what it is, And I remember when I thought it was just like a photo editing app, and I was very resistant to put any photos, on there in the beginning. And I know I remember us having a conversation one time about when you first started posting pictures of yourself in a bikini, which, two things to say about this. First of all, now knowing what people are posting on Instagram, it was
Yeah,
such a wild like idea at the time to imagine women putting themselves naked on the internet like this on their own personal pages. It just was
yeah,
unheard of. So, but in your circumstance, it's almost like that was your profession. Like you lived in a bikini. This was,
yeah,
you had a reason for it. And so it wasn't so, you know, shocking for you to have to do that. And on top of it, you had been in the magazines that, in your surf uniform
yeah,
in
yeah,
magazines before. So
yeah.
I think that it's so cool, just the progression and how things build, because I think it's difficult for people sometimes to find a career or to have a vision, and you never, like, it's almost like when you're in it, you can't sometimes see beyond the reality that you're living right now, right? Like when you were going through your career, we didn't know that social media was going to be a platform that you could then build your own, have more control over your own media presence, and I just think it's so interesting to watch that unfold. And so let's talk about that. When I know you had a video too that went viral at one point of you dancing before one of your surf competitions, and then also leading into posting more pictures of yourself on Instagram. So let's touch into like the transition of all those things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. Like, I mean, again, when I started Instagram and started showing, you know, myself more than like food and things like that, like people, especially in the surf industry, were like really like negative, really taken aback, really like, oh my gosh, you're posting yourself in a bikini on the internet. And that alone, no matter like even if it was a shot even if it was me surfing, people were like really like weirded out because I think it also was a time of like privacy, and I think like people were like you're putting yourself on the internet, which is a hard thing still in general, like because there is a privacy thing and there is like, you know, it is a pretty personal thing sharing your life and what you're doing and where you're at like with the world. So for me, it was definitely kind of weird because like I did, like you said, have the context of like I was like at an event or I was doing something like for my job, which my job at the time was being paid to surf and be at an event or to be doing videos, surf videos, photos, etc. So yeah, it was interesting, and to see where now it's gone with people in bikinis on there is definitely
Yeah.
funny because I'm like, oh my gosh. And but I think it's cool because I think, again, surfing isn't one of those sports that is a national league sport. It's global, yes, and there is an organization, but it still lacks like a huge audience within the league. So, what I think social media has done for a lot of female sports athletes that are in action sports or surfing or snowboarding or anything is that like it's given them their own platform, and sometimes their audiences are bigger than the actual competitive league, which is like something to be said and something really cool for females in general because, even for surfing, it's always been you're the second fiddle to the guys. And now a
Hmm.
lot of the girls in general from Instagram are more popular than the guys. And so I think, it's pretty cool to look back. And even though I was like, uh, I'm not going to say super bullied, but definitely not like welcomed by doing it, that now it's kind of changed the industry a bit and kind of made people think like, oh my God, okay, like look, because again, it's one of those things where, all tides rise the boats, all the boats kind of theory.
Hmm.
I'm not saying sure if I'm saying that right,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I think it's definitely cool to see where sports and social media has gone in general.
Hmm. Same. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of female athletes, like even in sports that are not mainstream. Like I've seen a lot of like pro Olympic skaters, like in very niche sports, or runners, just because they're posting themselves. And obviously, there is some kind of, when an attractive woman posts pictures of herself, it's more popular and being, to be to it has a tendency to attract a bigger audience. But it's cool that through that you're able to almost promote a sport or give women a voice that they didn't really have before. And it doesn't make it a competition between the guys and the girls so much anymore for the spotlight. It's like giving equal opportunity in a way for women to also be seen and be heard and be, yeah, be seen on social media.
Yeah, totally. I think also like you said, it is elevating the sport too, like attention to these
Mhm.
there's a lot of cool sports that you just really don't know of much, or you don't see it on TV. I think that's the big thing. It's like you see like basketball, baseball, football,
Yeah,
and there's kind of
football, soccer, yeah.
yeah, there's kind of a theme is that like even a lot of like, even like football, for example, it's like that's not really a female element. I mean, there's some girls coming up actually. That's kind of interesting. But like, there could be a lot of different sub niches within even these bigger sports of girls that like can be seen on social media, whereas like before they just would be
Yeah.
existent. Like
Lost.
yeah,
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 lost in
yeah.
the background. Yeah. It's pretty interesting looking at it from that perspective. And then going into your experience as a very early influencer, maybe give us some insight into that and how you've kind of evolved from the start of it and how maybe things are different or how it's changed for you?
Yeah, I definitely think, I think having a social media presence and social media marketing influencer world and stuff has changed a lot. I think it went from even in advertising being like a second fiddle afterthought to now a lot of brands are making that their number one priority, right? And it's actually like taking over a lot of traditional like advertising. And I think the influencer culture though has changed for good and bad. I think what's really cool is that there is so many influencers now and so many there's so many niches within the internet now. Now it's like if you like, outdoor hiking in this part of the world, there's probably like an influencer who does it, or like people who do beauty that like have some crazy, like, I mean, it just it can go down so many sub niches, and I think that's pretty cool. And I think it's pretty cool that like on the internet, like you can do whatever you want. Like you can
Yeah.
literally be like, I am gonna do like a cooking account, like that cooks only X, Y, and Z, and I am gonna wear this and I'm gonna do this. And like that can be your thing. And like I think that's what's kind of cool with the influencer world is like the creativity that goes into it. I think
Yeah.
now because it's been known and like there's a lot of information out there, like how to make it your business and how to make it your career and how to make a living of it. I do think there is a lot of like false narratives with that. And I think there's a lot of good and bad, right? I think from a business standpoint, like anything, is that if there's a market and it becomes saturated, it's definitely more competitive. And it's one of those things where to make a career out of it full time is often, I would say, more time consuming than a full time job. It could be like double or triple. And so that's what I tell anyone, and at least what I've seen with like the industry in general, because there is so many sub niches, there is so many cool things on the internet. Like you are like, you have to take it like a job, you have to take it seriously, you have to show up, you have to be responsible. I think I've seen a lot of influencers have really bad work ethic and really bad responsibility, time management, etc., because they think they've built this platform and they have all these eyeballs and numbers and it's going to last forever. And I've actually seen a lot of people go from being this like top in demand influencer to, having kind of like a bad reputation and not following through and not being professional, not treating it like a real job, and them kind of ending up in a like not great space where like nobody wants to work with them. And because there's so many people now who want it and who are willing to work hard. And that's what I've seen, is that those people have longevity and also like have they treat it like a real business and not like a second fiddle sort of vibe. So those
Mm-hmm. Like an
definitely,
afterthought.
yeah, and those people definitely like succeed. And that's what I've been seeing more and more, that like, the culture of it being just like a casual thing. It's like, no, like a lot of people actually that are top influencers like have gone to school, have MBAs, have, they come in with a set mindset of like, I'm gonna make this a career versus just like, okay, like I'm famous now, like things should just happen to me. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that did exist for a little bit. Like I think there was a lot of people who would be like, okay, yeah, cool. But then now, just because of how big the internet is, like I don't
Mm-hmm.
see that going on much longer for those types of people.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it is a full-time job. Like I mean, I don't know how people do it. Like, you literally have to make your full-time job. I had a hard time just posting on my Instagram for years, and I never really I wasn't that consistent. But I mean, doing this podcast now and trying to keep up with social media, it is. So I commend you. And like I said, when I would watch you kind of preparing to work with brands, or when you got stuff in the mail and you would have to film for it or talk about it or post for it, it's like a lot of thought goes behind
Yeah.
this. So the more
And I
professional you can be,
Yeah, and I think like that's my advice or my takeaway from anything is that like you want to do the best that you can, and I think that just was driven into my mindset as like an athlete as like, okay, this is like your goal, your task, your person you're working with, like you need to do the best for them. And I think again, I think that there does need to have a little more conversation in the influencer world of like, yeah, like it, and anyone who creates content and posts, they get it. They know, like, like how it is time consuming, and you want to be good. And that's like also like a thing that I see a lot of people struggle with, where it's like they're unsure of like how it's going to do, or what they should post and different things. And I think at least the people that I've seen be successful, they kind of get rid of that. They're just kind of like, I'm going to show up, be consistent, and just go for it.
yeah. No, I mean, that's great advice. So from somebody who's been doing this since the beginning, take some pointers from her. um And on that note, like, so now you said you compete sometimes, and some of your passions are, making content. You're always traveling cool places. I think you're like one of the coolest people I know, not just because of your personality, but just like the experiences that you've had in life, and the opportunities that you've had to travel and do all that stuff. So tell us a little bit about that, because I always think it's so fun to live vicariously through you.
Yeah, no, I think traveling and doing things that like I was very blessed to travel at a young age and kind of get a grasp of the world and realize like there's a world outside of America. And
Mhm.
having lived different places too really kind of opened my mind up, because I think it's pretty easy. And like, I grew up in some of the most like beautiful places in the world, and I think it's pretty easy just to like get stuck in your bubble and that mindset of like just being like, okay, this is my life and this is like how people are and this is like how it works. And I think for me, like I love feeling like a little bit like, oh my gosh, I've lived like multiple lives. And I think that's something that I've seen with a lot of people that I know recently, is that like people want changes or people want to like maybe try or do something else. And I think, again, like I think you need to do what you're feeling and like what your body and your soul and your heart or whatever it is like telling you to do. Because I think, at least my personal opinion, as people, like we were meant to like migrate a bit and like go around and do new things and like not be necessarily like in a routine, like, but also,
Stagnant.
yeah, stagnant. But I also think that like routines and being like settled is very good. And I do think that sometimes you do need to like try new things to appreciate that also too, because even a lot of my friends that have careers or jobs that is like a 9 to 5, and you know is maybe like not the most exciting, they kind of have this grass is greener thing. And again, I think it's one of those things like they maybe should experience that a little bit just to have appreciation for their like current life and not feel like FOMO or like, oh my gosh, I want to work remote, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I think that's something too that like I talk to a lot of people and they're like, oh my gosh, blah, blah. But I'm like, there is very positive attributes to like finding something you love that is stable and that is like, a schedule. Like, again, a lot of good things come from that. So I think it's finding your balance. I'm like, oh yeah, you should travel and be a migrant, but also like, do this too. So I think it's like having that experience if you can with traveling, and also like figuring out how to travel now is a lot easier, and there's ways that you can budget, even like doing traditional like Airbnbs where you stay in someone's house, like go for it. Like I think some of my best experiences have been like where I was like, I had $20 and I was, going here, and I like was like, I am gonna figure it out.
Yeah. And it's so cool how like you meet so many different people, and you and I met on a photo shoot
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Shay so randomly, and it's just funny how you make friends, and we just hit it off, and like always, just randomly would hang out and see each other a bunch over when you were living in Miami at the time. And yeah, it was cool, and I always appreciate that, because no matter like months and months can go by and we could just like pick up where we left off. And I always think that's like one of the most valuable things in life are the relationships that you build. And like you said, being able to experience new places, it's really cool when you then meet friends that are from a totally different, you connect with people, I should say, that have a totally different lifestyle or past than you do. It's just, yeah, it's really, really
Yeah.
fun. And, I also wanted you to give us your insights on a conversation that we were having about dating, because I'm always asking you if you know any single guys to meet up
Yeah.
with. And we always end up talking about relationships and guys. And, I was telling you a little bit about what I was learning in school recently. And just, when we were catching up, you were asking me about my dating experiences, and I was filling you in on the last, bit of that. So I love that conversation that we were having about how expectations these days can almost be like a killer of your happiness, and and almost sabotage something that's good, or how, some people can find themselves being unhappy because they want this, and this, but then, they expect a guy who's doing X, Y, and Z to have all the time in the world to give them and to be thinking about them all the time. And, yeah, so let's talk about that.
No, totally. I think it's such an interesting thing right now. And I think it actually ties into a lot of things in the world that we live in, which is a lot of social media, right? And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people seeing people or reading things, or just like having a lot of options, even too. Like, I know dating apps are like more popular than ever, and that is what a lot of people do. I met my guy on a dating app. I am all for it, but I also think there's like a lot of negatives that come with that too. And I think what I've been seeing and just talking to a lot of peers, and this is like guys, girls, whoever, that the older you get, the more of a expectation list or like a checklist you have of your partner. And I think what I've seen is like people will meet great people, and I'll talk to a lot of my friends about dating, and then they're like, well, he doesn't do this, or he is not on this part of my checklist. And I think, kind of having these unrealistic expectations of people is really bad and sad, because I see a lot of great people kind of X out people because like maybe like they don't like that they don't, do this, or they don't like this type of food, or like they don't like to go out and they don't like to do XYZ. And so I think having more, not to say like realistic expectations of a partner, but realistic of like, nobody's perfect, right? And that finding someone that you connect with and have a great feeling with, and that your lifestyles and your, I think the most important thing is like goals. I think goals and what you want is more important than, some like superficial stuff. And I think, not even from a look standpoint, but like, of what people want out of a partner, and it is
Yeah.
kind of wild when I hear some people I know do lists, and then I'm like, well, where are you on this person's list? Like, do you want someone to sit there and say, oh, you have to be a certain height, or you have to be a certain look, or you have to have a certain job, or you have to have a certain social calendar, like, whether that be you going out, staying in, whatever. But like, and often the question is, when you ask someone who has kind of a list, that I found is that they are like, oh, like what? And I'm like, well, if you want
Yeah.
all these things, like you need to be, that to someone.
That too.
Be
Yeah.
prepared for someone to come with a list that's even crazier, So
Hmm.
I think, what I've been seeing a lot is just a lot of unrealistic expectations. And, a lot of times, at least with women, what I see with guys, with dating is like a time thing. They like, a lot of my friends want more time, more attention, more emotional uh,
Connection.
connection, and things like that. And I think, again, if you look back in history, a lot of communities were kind of like very female, right? So you would have the group of females, and you would get sometimes this support from other people besides your mate, right? Your male
Mhm.
counterpart. So I see a lot of people, and I'm not saying, oh, there's not like emotional or like guys that can be your best girlfriend out there, but I also think that like having that expectation that like if a guy doesn't want to like sit on the phone and talk to you about your shopping for like 3 hours, that like that doesn't mean he doesn't care and love you. It's just that like he's not your girlfriend.
Yeah,
um
I'm a total firm believer in that. Like, there are things that you just don't discuss with a guy just because it's like guys aren't supposed to be almost like your emotional sounding board. Like, that's why you have friends, almost so you can hash out certain things. I mean, obviously, if it pertains to your relationship and you need to communicate with the person and you both need to be on the same page, that's, everyone needs love, attention from like their partner. But when it comes to like, complaining, I don't think guys, a lot of women don't understand. Guys don't want to hear you complain about, you know, whether it's your mom, your girlfriend. Like, talk to your friends about that shit and leave your man out of it, because I think it would be a healthier thing for your relationship. And then when like kind of what you were saying, to when a woman is expecting this guy to be this high achiever and, making X amount with the X amount of job, but also to be like super cool and then also sit there and like do all these romantic things for you all the time. And then, have time to just make you feel like the most important person in the world. I think, yeah, it is interesting to kind of step back and look at your expectations to say, well, you know, if a guy's working all the time to make the salary that I want, is that really realistic to then expect him to be available to plan romantic things for me all the time and, be home for dinner with me? I guess that doesn't really make sense. And, again, the social media aspect of it these days is really, I think, negatively influencing people's expectations of what's real. Just like, the movies, they say Disney used to create these unrealistic fairy tale um, scenarios for girls about what to expect your Prince Charming to be. And I think, again, with so many options and so much like fake just snapshots of moments in time do not show a whole story. And I think people start getting these almost delusional expectations, just to even show off to other people. And it's like, I don't know, there's always, with whether it's on Instagram or dating apps, I think people are devaluing a real connection with someone because there's always a better option out there, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's like something that why I find what you're studying now and what you're going into like so interesting, because I do think there is some like human nature thing to like want more. Like I do, like I think people,
Yeah.
it's very often, no matter who the person is, that like people are like always content, right? And so I
Mhm.
think knowing that, but then having like digital world influence like more of that, where it's like you're saying, like even too, like it's very easy to go on Instagram during Valentine's Day, for example, and see all this stuff, and it's like, okay, like someone's like getting someone like hundreds of roses and balloons and like this gift or this trip or this that, and like who knows what their actual relationship's like. I mean, it could be awful, this they whatever, but online it looks great. And I think or maybe it is, but like I think having that, like, oh, like so and so's partner did this and that in the
Mhm.
back of your head is I think it's almost hard not to like sit there and compare, or like to look. It's very hard not to be like affected by social media. I think it's like, even if you are really headstrong and stuff, I think it's just finding like that balance of like, okay, like what is this and this information I'm taking in versus like how I feel in the world, so I think what you're saying though, and kind of like the culture though, is very like just short term. Like, this is good now, maybe something's better, I'll look around, whatever. And I think that's really sad, I do. I think it's like, because again, more valuing like the real things, which is like connection and goals and like different things that you can like grow with someone, is also like, I think traditionally like so good that like that gets lost if you're looking at people or like swiping or whatever, like.
Yeah. Your ability to really actually build a connection with someone and build something. I mean, that's why you should want, I think, to be with someone to build a life together, because no relationship's going to be perfect ever. And it's not, there's always going to be challenges or like a need to compromise and meet in the middle with people. But yeah, I think if your focus is always on like looking like around, if someone's sitting in front of you, it's like, oh wait, is that guy hotter or like richer? It's like, or is that
I
girl got bigger boobs? Like,
Yeah, and I think what's interesting now too, and like not even saying from like people looking to date people, but just like
yeah,
communication in general, like something that I kind of think about sometimes is like how we could be communicating one on one, and I be on my phone having five different conversations, and whether that be work, family, friends, whatever, is that like having you know that balance of like when you're hanging out with someone, that you're like actually present. And like I think it's very easy also to have conversations with people that, and it's good and bad, right? Like it's like I could be talking to you and you're across the world, and I could be out to lunch with my friend, right? And so it's like this also weird intersection of like real life, digital life, kind of like coming together in a way, because it's like texting is talking, right? Texting, messaging on Instagram, doing whatever. And I think it can you can kind of maintain relationships or maintain conversations with people who aren't in front of you, but it could take away from when you are actually like hanging out with someone. Again, if it's dating, friends, family, whoever, work, even, like it is hard. It is a challenge, I think, for people now, just to like have that disconnect too, which I think is also like interesting when it comes to like dating specifically, because like again, it's just like it's really hard for people to disconnect, and that's just kind
yeah,
of like the world we live in. Like even with work and stuff, it's like the traditional like you hang out with someone or you're off work, it's not usually like that for a lot of people. So I think it's like
Yeah,
finding that time.
that balance too, because it's so funny that you're saying this and you brought this up because I was recording a podcast with another girl like a week or two ago, and we literally talked about how rude it is when you're sitting with somebody, depending on the context. If you're like, hey, I have an hour to meet, but I'm working, and I, need to take a call if it comes. But if you're sitting with somebody and supposed to be spending time with them, and they're just like this the whole time on their phone, and you're not paying attention to what you're saying, it could be very frustrating. And especially not only just with friends, maybe not so much if that's your relationship with your friend, you can
Yeah.
hang out for hours and just both be on your phones in silence, because I have a friend that is the scenario. But it is nice, and I mentioned on that interview too that the last two guys I dated, I felt more connected to them, I think, because when we were together, we were together, we were present, neither of us were on our phone. We spent our time talking or hanging out or watching a movie together, whatever it might have been that we were doing. They definitely didn't have their phone out the whole time, which makes you feel like the person cares about you, whether it's your friend or someone you're with, romantically involved with. So it's a very important point. And I think it's funny that you brought that up again, because I think this is a big, I guess, like the elephant in the room these days, with everybody being so on their phone all day, 24/7.
Yeah, and I think it's good, and I think it's to have that, like, okay, and again, it's like you can't tell someone, hey, don't be on your phone, like that's, I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
can, but like I think it's something that, like, especially like, again, friends, dating, whoever, it decreases your level of getting to know someone and someone be present. And I think more than like, let's say people always looking for a bigger, better, prettier girl or whoever, it's like to focus just on what's in front of them and like actually get to know people and not be distracted. And again, whether that be with like work, family, friends, whatever, but like
Mm-hmm.
having that. And I think that's something that is refreshing when you are around people, whether it's your friends or a guy you're dating or whoever, that like that they do respect that and they draw that boundary. Because I think right now it is difficult for people to draw that boundary, and it because it is very socially accepted. Like it wouldn't be that weird if you're hanging out with someone and they check their phone, because it could be an emergency, it could be this. And I think the culture of that has changed, whereas before it was like rude almost. Now it's like, oh, whatever, like it's just how people live their lives in the digital slash overlap with your real world. But yeah, I think like that's what I would say would be a great, thing when you're getting to know anyone in your life, to
Mm-hmm.
as much presence.
No, and I think it's important too for people to be aware of this anyways, because what just popped into my head too is I'm taking developmental psychology right now. And it reminds me because I have friends who have kids, and if you are on your phone, like there's a very important phase in a child's development, from birth to I think 3 or 5 years old, where they need to feel seen and heard by a parent. And it could be very damaging for your child's development if, when they are trying to interact with you, you're staring at your phone the whole time, because it's a barrier between them being able to relate to you, and the only way that they know how to is by having you look at them and give them your attention, and um, it's very important for how they attach to their parents and how they learn to relate and interact with other people from that stage on in life, because it like very much shapes your ability to attach in relationships later in life. So it just reminded me, because I do have friends that literally stare at their phones and they're like constantly tap 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 on the phone, like
Yeah.
texting, and I'm just like, and their kids are just like following them around or you know what I mean? I'm just like, oh,
Ooh,
come
that's
here.
that's definitely interesting. And like, I think that's going to be something you're going to see like residual effects from growing up with like the younger generations that, it is kind of crazy to think that is so important. And like, that isn't probably really chatted about, right? Because again, it's not weird to be on your phone with people. So even with a kid, it's like, I didn't know that. Like, I was like, makes sense though.
Yeah.
So that's pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, not only does it affect adults, it really affects children. So the
Yeah.
next time you guys want to just throw your kid in front of a screen, maybe consider
Yeah.
consider taking, 20, 30 minutes with them to play with them with their toys or something. It's just an interesting like you said, to see how that affects life and people's development for the younger generations to come. Yeah, just even more disconnection.
Yeah.
But anyways, on that note, Anastasia, on
Yeah.
that high note,
Yeah.
um, yeah, just I appreciate you coming on today. Like I said, Anastasia, you're one of like the coolest, most nicest, positive. I never hear you talking bad about anyone, and I think you're just um a really great person to be out there influencing, because I think it's really important to have people who are really authentic. And when I think of the word authentic, you definitely are someone that I can say I know in real life and who has a large following on social media. And you are who you are, and it's there's no incongruency there between who you are on social media and who you are in real life. So I appreciate you being here and sharing your story. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we sign
Yeah,
off?
no, I appreciate everything that you do, and thank you for the kind words. I know that I've told you this too, and just talking, and I think, what you're studying and the realm of your content and everything is so cool and needed now, just because again, like you mentioned, like being authentic and being real. And I think there is a lot of nonsense on the internet and a lot of negative, um, I would say, culture and things around it. And I think it is really important of what you're doing with like inner beauty and speaking to, be bigger than what people think, right? Or that what you put out. And I think that's really important, especially in like today's landscape of like what people think beauty is. And I think it's really cool what you're doing. And so, yeah, no, I'm super stoked to done this pod with you and talk to you. As always, we could ramble on for a long time. I mean, it's pretty impressive. I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. But yeah, no, I think it's just because we align on a lot of different levels when it comes to that. And I think that's pretty cool that what you're doing and sharing that message.
Thank you so much, Anastasia. And if people want to connect or find you on socials, where can they do so? Tell us
Yeah.
your Instagram and everything.
Yeah. So all my accounts are just under my name, Anastasia Ashley. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, you name it. I'm probably on there somewhere. But yeah, I'm on there. So check me out, and say hello.
Yes, and you can find if they want to see you surfing, they can find that on your Instagram and also YouTube, right?
Yeah,
Videos of
I do
you
a bit of
throughout your
that.
career on YouTube.
Yeah, so I'm kind of on every platform. I think you kind of have to be on some level. I don't post on YouTube as much as I should, but it's fun. It's definitely the most
Yeah.
challenging work because of the length of the videos, but yeah, it's a lot of fun.
But they can look, if they want to see you surfing in your competitions and stuff
Yeah, yeah. So
there.
there's
Some of that.
archival shots on there for sure.
And one more thing I want to say to you. So when you were talking about like helping people and being willing to give people advice. I'll never forget, and neither will my two little cousins, when
Yeah.
you were up in like Jupiter that one day.
Yeah.
And my little cousins, and you came and met us at the beach and taught my cousins how to surf. They just thought that was the coolest thing, and I always thought that
Yeah.
was so cute and so cool that you surfed with my little cousins and showed them, and they ended up going to surf camp after that, like a few summers. So, anyways, she's
Yeah.
such a sweet person. That just that just shows who you are as
No,
a
I
person too,
love
to
that.
take the time to do that. Yeah.
I love that they took that experience and like wanted to do more and like were stoked, and I think that's
Mhm.
what's really important is like just helping people or like showing them like, okay, here, like you can do this, and I think being a girl, especially like still, it's like even though there's a ton of girl surf stuff out there, it's still intimidating. So yeah, so I was super glad I was able to like show them, and
Yeah.
they're pretty cool cousins you have, though. I'll say that I was pretty
Yeah.
impressed. I was like, they're an easy girls to work with. So
Yeah. And I just to wrap it up, to say one more thing. And we're gonna go on for the next hour
yeah,
just complimenting each other.
yeah,
But I want to say too, that is something very cool. I think that can be attributed to you over your career, just for like being one of the people who like forged a path for other athletes and other females to just be present and have a presence online, and to get exposure to things that people normally wouldn't see, like outside of mainstream media. So anyways, thank you, Anastasia, for sharing your work, for being such a great savvy businesswoman and having such a great work ethic, and being just a very genuinely awesome human.
and
Okay, bye.
we will continue this conversation once again, probably in person or on a call. So yes.
Yeah, so we'll talk later, but thank you for being here today, and thank you everyone for listening.